Welcome to the TechEd podcast, where we visit with leaders who are shaping, innovating, and disrupting technical education. People who are not afraid to think differently, not afraid to try something new, all with the goal of securing the American dream for the next generation of STEM and workforce talent. Welcome into the TechEd podcast. It is your host, Matt Kirkner. As many of our listeners know, I moved over from the world of manufacturing to the world of education now some 7 years ago or so. And as I came over to education, especially in the world of technical and community colleges, there was one name that came up all the time. It didn't matter what conference I was at. It didn't matter what meeting I was at. It didn't matter what organization I was a part of. Today's guest's name is all over technical education and all over technical and community colleges. And her fingerprints are all over the great things happening in the state of Indiana. Our guest, and we're really proud and happy to welcome Sue Smith, who is the Vice President for Advanced Manufacturing and Applied Sciences at Indiana's statewide community college system, Ivy Tech Community College. And Sue, you're a great friend. You've been a mentor. I've learned so much from you, and it's really an honor to have you with us. Thanks for joining us on the podcast.
Thank you. It's great to be here. And you've been a friend and a mentor as well. And I'm really excited. I always watch your listen to your podcasts, and I learn a lot every time I listen to one.
Well, and as I've mentioned to you, every time I'm in the room with you, I learn something new about technical education, about building partnerships with employers, about how much you care about students and how much you care about the entire community of the state of Indiana. We're going to explore all of that today. But one of the things I've been fascinated with, Sue, and you've got an incredible background and one that really influences the work that you're doing now. But as you and I were talking just a few short weeks ago, you've really dedicated a huge part of your career and the rest of your career to the world of technical education. I know our audience would love to hear about what keeps you so energized and committed to the great work that you're doing.
Seeing the students succeed and have these great careers with the industries that we have in Indiana, that's really what keeps me going. And, I'll be at the grocery store or somewhere at a meeting, and someone will come up to me and say, you probably don't remember me, but I was in this program or that program, and it changed my life. And, I have this wonderful career, or sometimes I hear I'm retired and I, had this great career. And so that's really what keeps me going. But that's not the only thing. I really am concerned with economic development in the state of Indiana and ensuring that we have the great high wage and high demand jobs that can support our economy and really our standard of living. And so I like to work with economic development, and we work with them all the time. And we hear from our employer partners that come to the state, one of the reasons, and sometimes the main reason, that they located in Indiana was because we have this statewide workforce system that can develop the talent that they need for their facilities.
I used to have a manufacturing plant in Shelbyville, Indiana, and we opened that plant actually in 2008, right in the middle of kind of the economic challenges that were going on that year. So it was an interesting time to open up a plant. But you're exactly right. The reputation that Ivy Tech has in your state draws tremendous interest from employers because, as we know, and it's really in the 15 years that have ensued since I started that plant, it's even more acute, the need for a talented workforce, the need for individuals that have the skills and competencies we need in advanced manufacturing. I know that's a huge part of what you're doing. And as I started this little part of the discussion with, I saw a post on LinkedIn this week. One of your instructors had opened up an addition to the campus in Shelbyville, along with some really cool equipment. And so I can speak from experience that the value of having a great workforce and knowing not just that the workforce today is a solid workforce, but that there's a plan and there's a system in place for creating the future of the workforce so that you can continue that economic vitality in Indiana. And 5 and 10 years from now, you'll still be running into people in the grocery store who tell you that their experience at Ivy Tech absolutely changed their lives. And there's no better feeling, I'm sure, in the world than knowing that the work that you're doing had a difference and made a difference in somebody's life. Ivy Tech is doing incredible work across the entire state. So, and for our listeners who may not be completely familiar with your model and what you do, just tell us a little bit about Ivy Tech.
Sure. So Ivy Tech is the largest singly accredited community college in the United States. We have about 180,000 students. But we're also the largest post-secondary institution in Indiana. So we're larger than Purdue and larger than IU. We have 19 campuses that blanket the entire state. Each one has a service area. And they're supplemented by 41 sites. And so the Shelbyville site that you referenced is one of those 41 sites that we have built out to support our industry partners. So the model really is that all of these campuses are led by one president and one strategic plan. Now, the campuses all have campus leadership that support them and support that community and that service area, but they are led by the one president and one strategic plan. It's a centralized structure that really provides for some regionally determined services. So we don't have the same programs in every community because they're not needed in all those communities, but we do have that statewide structure with a local presence.
And that's really an interesting structure. I want to dig into that a little bit more. Certainly huge benefits, centralization, huge benefits to having one strategic plan for the entire state, which is different than maybe some of the surrounding states. As you know, I live in the state of Wisconsin, where while there's one technical college system, every single college is, and there's 16 of them here, are autonomous. We do quite a bit of work in the state of Michigan, very similar model there. Whereas in the state of Indiana, it is one model with a single president, a single leadership team, and then that local leadership at the individual campuses. But tell us about that centralized model and what some of the advantages are to having a model that works that way.
Sure. So internally for me, for example, for my school, it's easier to upgrade curriculum, change curriculum, because it's standardized all across the state. So if I need to change something in one campus service area, I can change it for the rest of the state, understanding that eventually, particularly if it's an upgrade, they're going to need to follow that same curriculum. So I think that's an internal benefit. And we also have the opportunity to add programs quickly because, we can add them where we need to across the state. But for the communities and the employers that we serve, the centralization really provides for a standardization of curriculum, training, services, resources, all of that standardized, and it's the same from, in every campus service area for the most part where it's needed. So if you need interns in South Bend, Indiana, you can call the Ivy Tech campus there. They can provide those interns. And we do the same thing if you have a facility in Shelbyville, Indiana, or if you have a facility in Evansville, Indiana. So we do have that, have that benefit of having that standardization of services and support for all of our communities across the state.
So it takes me back a few years, but then I referenced our plant in Shelbyville a number of years ago. When I was running that manufacturing company, we had three. We had a plant in Wisconsin, one in Iowa, and one in Indiana. And I remember going to the Iowa plant one time and hearing the plant manager say, well, we run our plant the Iowa way, and they run their plant the Indiana way. And I said, wait a minute. There's one best way. Let's figure out what that best way is, and let's run all of our plants that way. So that's the benefit of standardization, which really kind of harkens to some of the lean manufacturing tools and practices that I used in my manufacturing days, which was all about, let's invent the model once and let's make it as good as possible, and then repeat that over and over again. So tremendous benefits in so many ways to centralization. As we talk to some of the educators that have a more decentralized model, one of the things they'll highlight is that different regions of a state, and you alluded to this a little bit earlier, might have different industries, might have different cultures, different needs. And so a decentralized model might lend itself a little bit, in their opinion, a little bit better to that type of focusing on specific individual employers and specific industries. How do you respond to that as someone who's leading and helping to lead a large centralized model in terms of how you make sure that your programs are relevant to the different regions? Because being someone who spent a lot of time in your state, there are different industries and different cultures throughout the entire state.
Yeah, and I would agree that decentralization supports the local economies. And I think that's true. We have that model, though, that allows for that. And so I was originally hired in at the Columbus campus, and that's where I started my career with Ivy Tech. And so all of the folks that work at the Columbus campus live and they go to church and they shop and whatever around in this Columbus service area. And so we see everyone, we see the plant manager of Cummins, and we see these people all the time. And so we are there at the basketball games and the fair and whatever. And so I think you can provide that localized service or that even if you have this huge organization, I think that is possible. And I think we do a good job of that. Like I said, simply because we live and work in the communities where those service areas are.
The idea is that because the individuals that are working in the community college are members of the community, they certainly know the different aspects of which employers are doing what, which industries are strong and need support, and so on. That really is the way that you solve for being relevant on an individual campus basis, even though you're gaining all these benefits of a statewide strategic plan, centralized curriculum and planning, and so on. So it's a model that I can tell you from experience certainly works well in Indiana, and given the success of your manufacturers, I think you continue to outpace my state of Wisconsin as the state in the union that has the highest amount of the state's GDP being derived from manufacturing. I think we're number two. None of that happens without a workforce. That workforce doesn't happen without Ivy Tech. And so obviously that model is working really, really well. As we're continue to live and work in an economy that is evolving and is changing. And I know one of the things that's been a super hot topic, not just in your state, but across the country the last couple of years, is the whole idea of semiconductors. I think people that maybe weren't familiar with that term pre-COVID, as we worked our way through some of the supply chain challenges that we all dealt with over the course of the last several years, everybody knows that what a key component semiconductors are. It's so many of the different things that we use day in and day out. And I know that's a huge focus in the state of Indiana. Tell us about that. What's going on in the state of Indiana relative to semiconductors, and how is Ivy Tech thinking about that?
I know that we have had semiconductor companies in the state for years, but most recently, we have had just a real focus on semiconductor plants and recruiting them. The economic development folks have been recruiting them into the state. And part of that is, of course, because they are high wage, high demand positions, but also because, we do need to reshore those as much as possible and to produce those at a competitive price. So we've got a new one that located in Lafayette. It's called Skywater, and they located there mostly because we would be able to create the ecosystem that they needed to get the talent that they needed into their facility. And so we worked with them and talked with them about what they were going to need, how many technicians, how many folks at engineering level, and so on. And so we have worked with Purdue to develop that training so that it starts out with just a certificate that can be added onto our manufacturing programs, and that can prepare someone to work in the industry. And they can take that and transfer it into Purdue, and then they can go on up to a PhD level. So we start out certificate, associate degree, and then they can go on into a master's and a bachelor's and a PhD or whatever they need to do. So it's been a very successful program so far. We had an event this summer and recruited over 100 folks into that event to take a look at the semiconductor world and what that's going to look like. We also have, it's not only the things that we use every day. There are lots of different semiconductor companies that make different kinds of chips, but also thinking about the Department of Defense. I mean, we have Crane Naval Base here in Indiana, and Crane has started attracting some of those semiconductor companies to their location simply because of the security that's needed in developing some of those defense-related chips. And so Enhanced is another semiconductor company that is working near our Bloomington campus in our Bloomington service area, and we're working with them as well to design what they want. So it's not always exactly the same, but it is similar. They have been telling us that what they really need for their technicians, for example, is our smart manufacturing and digital integration degree. So we've had some success in supporting them already with that degree.
So we've touched on some of the commonality. You talked about digital integration, advanced manufacturing, and some of the interest and allure that those programs have to expanding semiconductor facilities. Let's talk a little bit about maybe how they're different. So as you're working with semiconductor manufacturers, certainly the Mechatronics Foundation, the Advanced Manufacturing Foundation, a lot of similarities. But where are their differences, or what are some of those other competencies that they're looking for from your students that might be different from a traditional mechatronics program?
If you look at the obvious, the biggest difference is most of that work is done in a clean room environment.
Okay.
And so most of the manufacturing for those chips and batteries really too is done in a clean room environment. And so that requires a suit of some sort, that you have to wear. It ranges depending on the level of clean that needs to be in that manufacturing process. But certainly they have to wear various types of coverings over their clothes. And so a lot of people can do that and a lot of people can't do that. So I guess that's the first real obvious difference. And the other thing that's maybe not so obvious is that the technology that is used in manufacturing semiconductors is even more automated and it's even more integrated than it is in any other mechatronics company or advanced manufacturing company. So you're looking really here at more the integration of autonomous systems, I guess, for lack of a better term. So all the systems are autonomous. They're all integrated, working together. And so, the role of the manufacturing operator in that sense is just to keep everything going and just to monitor and maintain, what's happening. So I think that's the real difference.
Got it. So working in a clean room, way more automation, way more, vertically integrated manufacturing processes and so on. And it really speaks to the evolving face of American manufacturing and moving from the traditional industry 3.0 world into the industry 4.0 world. I know you've been a huge, not just an advocate, but really a subject matter expert on that transition, especially as it relates to technical education. So some really interesting and fascinating technologies, whether it's clean room technology, vacuum technology, whether it is automation, integration. Part of your role at Ivy Tech, especially as it relates to advanced manufacturing, is to have your eye on what's coming next. So as you think about emerging technologies, Sue, and what might be on the horizon for the next generation of manufacturing technologies, what are you thinking about? What's starting to emerge?
We're getting a lot of electric vehicle and battery companies locating in the state. We have our first gigafactory. That is a venture between Stellantis and Samsung. And so we're excited about that. And if you go Highway 31, you'll be able to see that facility and as it's being built near the Ivy Tech campus there. But those technologies are, again, they're more autonomous and more integrated in their systems than we're used to now. And so I think that is even going to grow. I mean, we're already working with Purdue on programs around AI and other technologies that nobody even uses right now.
Right.
But we have to be working in that direction. Those two, EV and battery, are something that the state is really focused on as well. And just recently, we've had Eli Lilly announce that they are going to be expanding in Indianapolis and in Lebanon, which is just north of Indianapolis. And their expansion isn't going to be what they're doing now necessarily, but going to be much more automated and again, much more autonomous and integrated. So, I think that this smart manufacturing digital integration degree and some of the, Smart Automation Certification Alliance credentials that we've built in that degree are really going to be what's needed to develop that workforce toward those new technologies. And, when we talk to Lilly, first talked to them about developing this biopharmaceutical manufacturing workforce and the centers that we're going to develop to have the equipment in them. I said, well, so what do you think is the most important skill for your, new workforce? And they said, curiosity. And I thought that was fascinating because really, when you think about it, if you're curious and continue to learn, you start out as an operator and you could go, wherever, just based on that curiosity and that ability and intentional learning.
Absolutely. I think about all my years in manufacturing and the whole idea of asking what if we could improve that bottleneck? What if we could lower our parts per million rejects from 25 to 5? Asking those what if questions, creating continuous improvement and continuous learning programs so that we're recognizing that we are in a manufacturing world that's going to continue to evolve. And it sounds like it doesn't matter whether it's a battery plant, an EV plant, a pharmaceutical plant, a semiconductor plant. A lot of the competencies that manufacturers and that large companies and companies large and small really are looking for are both those technical competencies, but also the ability to evolve along with technology, because we all know that as technologies and advancements such as artificial intelligence, you mentioned that a little while ago, such as additional automation, additional integration, additional vertical integration, especially in a manufacturing environment, the more curious an individual is, the more they're going to be able to morph as manufacturing technology changes. It also speaks to the different on and off ramps that we have in education, and the fact that you can be curious at any level, whether you're an individual, just leaving high school or even still in high school, somebody who's going on to a tech diploma or an associate degree, somebody who's going into the military, somebody who's going direct to workforce, all these different on and off ramps that we're seeing in manufacturing as advanced manufacturing organizations continue to expand and change the technologies that they're working with. And because of that, something you mentioned already, the Smart Automation Certification Alliance, and really the whole idea in a broader sense of stackable credentials and giving options to our students and letting them know that your career decision, your education decision is not a death sentence. You have so many different options as you make your way through your career and as you consider what your future might look like. And I know you and I actually, I think, initially got to know each other during our work with the Smart Automation Certification Alliance. You were an early adopter and early advocate, as was I, of the changes and the amazing things that SACA has done under the direction of Jim Wall. I heard just last week, by the way, as we record this episode, that SACA had awarded its 23,000th credential. So now 23,000 credential holders around the globe, really, certainly a lot of them across the United States. But you had really, really early interest in the Smart Automation Certification Alliance. What drew you to that organization? Talk about that.
Sure. So as Industry 4.0 became more popular and I run in manufacturing circles, and they began talking about it more and more, and what that might mean to their production processes and what that might mean for the skills that they need in the future. And so it was kind of a funny story because I happened to be at a meeting with Paul Perkins, and I pulled him aside. Paul Perkins, as you know him very well,
Yep.
Heads up Amatrol, which is a company here in our state that makes equipment. And so I happened to be in a meeting with Paul, and I said, Paul, I've got all of this equipment. I've got all these labs across the state. I've got 22 manufacturing labs across the state, and all of this faculty, and how am I going to upgrade everything to this Industry 4.0 level? Do we need new programs? What are your thoughts? What are you going to do with your equipment to get it to that, to that Industry 4.0 level? And he said, well, I've been working with this organization called SACA, Smart Automation Certification Alliance, and said, Jim Wall? Yes, I do know Jim Wall, actually. And so that's what started it, really, and just reached out to Jim and said, hey, can we get involved in this? And he said, sure. And so, is very impressed with the way those credentials were developed. They were developed with industries across the country. And, just with the input that they got from those industries, I think, it was, this is the way to go. So, we've always built our programs on certifications, and whenever possible. And the reason we do that is because that is a competency demonstration. So it's more than just you pass this course. You pass this course, and by the way, you can do these 10 things. And here's the proof that you can do that. So I think that was really one of the reasons we adopted certifications. But another one is that we can stack and crosswalk those. So that gives people a much better, much more flexibility to create their pathway, and even employers to create pathways. And so the other thing that the certifications do, and we thought about this very intentionally, is what about the hundreds of people who are already working in manufacturing? How do we get them up to the level? So the incumbent workers, also, how do we get them up to the level they need to be? And certifications are the way to do that. Obviously, they're not going to go back and get a degree after 30 years of working in industrial maintenance. So that was really helpful as a standalone option for folks as well.
One of the things that Paul suggested to me several years ago, as we were talking about workforce training, to the point that you just made, Sue, was, when you think about the individuals working in manufacturing, you turn the clock forward 20 years from now, most of the people that will be working in manufacturing in 20 years are already working in manufacturing. So in as much as it's really important for us to inspire high school students to work at the technical and community college level, to make sure that we're instilling the right competencies and abilities in individuals as they go through that career pathway, in that educational pathway, I should say, it's equally as important, maybe even more important, to make sure that our incumbent workforce is going to have relevant skills 20 years from now. And again, they're already working in manufacturing as that world continues to change and evolve. And so you and I agree that in addition to the ideas of tying credentials to educational programs, making sure that individuals graduate, like you said, with those 10 competencies as a result of earning a certification that are valued by industry. Valued by industry because if a certification is set up properly, it's based on competencies that industry is asking for, kind of tying back to the original couple of meetings that you and I had as part of those technical work groups standing up SACA. So lots and lots of great things have happened with the Smart Automation Certification Alliance. Through no small part, the hard work that you and others at Ivy Tech have put into helping expand the appeal of those certifications. So tell us about how that's going in Indiana. Is the interest in SACA growing? Tell us how SACA is working out for you in Indiana and at Ivy Tech.
Yeah, so as you know, Matt, we had a list of competencies is what we started out with as we looked to upgrade our current curriculum, and we mapped our current curriculum to that list of competencies, thinking that in doing so, we would be upgrading everything to the Industry 4.0 level. But when we mapped it, we knew that some of those certifications fit some of our current classes, but we had this huge gap. And so really that huge gap and those SACA credentials were what we based our smart manufacturing and integration degree on. And so, then we looked back at our employer partners and realized that we were several years ahead of them for the first time in my career.
Awesome.
That we were several years ahead of them in what they needed. And a lot of those folks are still at the Industry 3.0 level, as you know, and struggling to catch up, but they'll get there because we all know they have to. But so in Indiana, when we built that new degree and we upgraded our curriculum, we also had to upgrade our labs. And so we did that. We had to upgrade our faculty skills. So we did that even at the secondary level. So we have dual credit. So those faculty who teach those skills had to have the SACA credentials as well. So it's growing in Indiana just, by the nature of having to, touch so many people with it. But we do have a couple of companies that have really been anchor companies in our state. One of those is Lippert, and they have upgraded all of their apprenticeship programs with these skills. And the other one is Inderson Hauser. Now we have lots of users, Farisha, and all, lots of folks that are using the credentials. But Inderson Hauser and Lippert both have tremendous apprenticeship programs and have been real users and early adopters, as you said, of these credentials, and they've been very successful. They're very thrilled with the way that these employees are, learning, and they're adopting. They're not afraid to jump on those higher level technical processes and equipment, and just really move forward with that.
I know Anderson Hauser well from my time in metal finishing and obviously on the process control side, and to have a company. Lippert as well, but to have companies like that with a global reach and certainly an international reputation, wrapping their arms around the certifications that you're offering. I mean, it makes such a huge difference. And then knowing that they're supporting the competencies that are embedded in those certifications, I think gives you, your students, and your community that level of reassurance and that level of confidence that you're absolutely hitting the target when it comes to valued industrial competencies. I think back, one of the things you just said, Sue, that resonates with me so well in the world of Industry 4.0. And I think back to some conversations I had with community and technical college educators early on, is that technology and the idea of smart technology and the fourth industrial revolution was emerging maybe 5 or 6 years ago. And a lot of the educators were saying, well, our industrial employers aren't really asking for this yet. And my answer was always, there aren't a lot of these areas, but this is one of those areas where education has to lead industry, because we're seeing the fact that these technologies are emerging. We're understanding what smart sensors and smart devices and data analytics are going to do to manufacturing. And if we wait for some of our employers to ask for this, it might be too late. And so credit to you for being way out on the front end of the Industry 4.0 movement and pivoting your degree programs and pivoting your institution in a way that has responded well and now provides value to great employers like Lippert, like Anderson Hauser, and others. You touched on the importance of dual credit, and I know that's something that you've been a huge advocate for. How do we, create really efficient pathways from secondary education into post-secondary and give students as much credit for the great work they're doing while they're in high school, so that when they get to a community college, maybe they can take what would be a 1-year tech diploma and turn it into a semester, or a 2-year associate degree and turn it into a 1-year pathway, or sometimes even less. So talk about how SACA is augmenting and facilitating dual enrollment in the state of Indiana.
Sure. So as I said before, when we upgrade our programs, we also have to upgrade our high school programs and our high school faculty and our CTE faculty and programs. And so we've done that, and that's been very successful. They've adopted that easily in most cases. And so for us in Indiana, we have these very intentional pathways. And those pathways are dual credit, and they're aligned with employers. They require internships. So the demographic of our student is that when they get out of high school, they have to work. And so the goal of these pathways is to prepare them for that first job. And while they're going to that first job, they can complete their degree and get even more additional training. So that's what we've been doing with these pathways. And so for example, as we built out the Smart Manufacturing and Digital Integration degree, we built out a high school pathway that goes along with that degree, complete with the SACA certifications. And, we've had one class go through that, and they're doing very well, just as a pilot. And of course, now, they've all adopted it. Those students will come out ready to go to work, and then they can continue on with their education.
Makes a huge, huge difference, right? So they, like you're graduating from high school, you've got these credits that you've already earned, these certifications that you've already earned. Now you're in the workforce, you're earning money right out of school, and your employer in many cases is helping you on that next step of your education journey. So to the earlier discussion that we had, none of this is a dead end. None of it is a life decision. You've got all these on and off ramps that are created through the use of third-party certifications and stackable credentials, and nobody has led that stronger than Sue Smith and Ivy Tech. One of the examples, I think, of great opportunities for students that are participating in the SACA journey is the opportunity now to go to community college programs, of course, but to now do some 4-year degree programs, which are really interesting. You and I have talked recently with David Ding of the University of Wisconsin Stout, who's been just a great leader on his, what I say is it's the University of Wisconsin Stout's automation leadership degree, one of the most highly in demand skill sets that individual manufacturing employers are asking for as people complete their education journey, which is give me somebody that can come into my manufacturing facility, help be a part of a digital transformation, help integrate programmable logic controllers with robotics, with conveyors, with sensors, with devices, create these manufacturing systems, really high demand competencies and skill sets. And now we've got a degree program that not only delivers on those skill sets, but does it in a really efficient way. The University of Wisconsin Stout Automation Leadership degree, where up to 61 credits of a 120 credit bachelor's degree can come from SACA certifications. Now, you've been highly interested, I know, and a great advocate for the future of this program. Tell us about why you think programs like the one at UW Stout, the Automation Leadership degree, are so unique, so interesting, and are they indeed the future of higher education?
It is the future of higher education. The future of higher education has got to be skill-based. It's got to be flexible. It's got to be easy to access. I mean, those things are going to be critical for the future of education. And as educators, we just have to own that. We just have to accept and own that. And the reason I was so excited about this program with the University of Wisconsin Stout is that, industry, as we've talked, is in kind of that 3.0 space. How do they get to that 4.0 space? Well, they get there by having the strong leadership that can take them there, which may start with these SACA credentials where they're not afraid to jump in, and they're not afraid of the technology. They're not afraid of the automation. So they jump in and they're going into that leadership role. I mean, we get that all the time. And I know other community colleges do too. And what happens after the associate degree, this is easy to access. The University of Wisconsin Stout degree is easy to access, and students can take it while they're working. They can transfer all that certification in. As educators, we have got to adopt the mindset of no credential left behind. Understand that, that folks are going to come in with this short-term certificate, and they're going to come in with this program or this certificate or this academic degree or whatever. And we've got to learn to shape those into those career pathways that people need, that employers need. And so I think that's what this really does. It takes all of those and says, okay, we value this. We're going to teach all these folks how to be leaders. And so they can come in from various entry points and exit points and back onto this highway to this 4-year degree and on. As I understand it from David, he is going to push on for higher level degrees. And so I think that's perfect for what the future of education, where it's going.
Exactly. David talks about the idea is you earn the automation leadership degree, which could be, if a high school student plays their cards right, could be had a year and a half or 2 years out of high school if you earn the right credentials along the way. Just a fascinating future. And then from that standpoint, David's talking about adding on a graduate degree program as well for another 1 year. So now you've got a master's degree in 2 or 3 years right out of high school. It really is incredibly innovative. I love your idea and your words. I'm gonna use that. No credential left behind. That is awesome. So often we hear students talk about, well, they're earning college credits, but in the past they were what we called credits to nowhere. So you get a credit, but it doesn't count toward a degree program. Well, that's fine. You learn something, but it's not really giving you that head start or making your education journey any more efficient. So the idea of if you're earning a third-party credential, if you're earning a credential that's valued in industry and you've earned that credential as a student, let's find a way to make that count for something useful and valuable so that we can make your education journey as efficient as possible. So many of us are influenced by different things when we're growing up and when we're in our teen years. And one of the questions that we love to ask every guest, Sue, on the TechEd podcast as we close our time with them is to think about that 15-year-old version of yourself. Your whole life is ahead of you. And if you had the opportunity, Sue, to go back in time and share one piece of advice with that young version of yourself, that 15-year-old version of yourself, what would that piece of advice be?
My 15-year-old self was not really thinking much about anything other than, writing scary novels like Stephen King and literary novels like William Faulkner. So that's kind of where I was. But if I could give myself one piece of advice, it would be don't get too comfortable or too complacent with where you are in your job or in your life. You should always seek knowledge and seek credentials that, that can be valuable and better your position, whatever it is and wherever it is, but also that could help the greater good. You have to be focused on that as well. And I would say, you won't be able to change the world for everybody, but you can change it for some people, and that's success. So that's, I think, what I would say.
Absolutely. And I would tell you that whether or not you gave that advice to yourself, your 15-year-old version of yourself, you have absolutely accomplished that goal in terms of changing lives, in terms of not being complacent, not sitting still, being a lifelong learner, and recognizing that whether you're leading your own life, you're leading a family, or you're leading an organization, looking to the future, figuring out what's coming, and then adjusting yourself in a way that you're there before everybody else. And then you enable other individuals to benefit from the fact that you had that vision and you had that tenacity to get started sooner than anybody else did. So you've absolutely lived a life of doing that. And certainly in your leadership at Ivy Tech, I can tell from experience in working with you that you have impacted hundreds of thousands of lives. And for that, you should be really proud. We're proud that we were able to have you on the TechEd podcast. It's been a great conversation about third-party credentials, about semiconductors, about Industry 4.0, and so on. We've just had a wonderful discussion. I want to thank you, Sue Smith, Vice President for Advanced Manufacturing and Applied Sciences at Ivy Tech Community College in the great state of Indiana, for being with us on the TechEd podcast.
Thank you so much. It was great.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the TechEd podcast. If you haven't already, subscribe, leave a review, and if you like this episode, share it with a friend. New episodes launch every Tuesday, so listen in next week.